Good morning, everyone, and welcome. And for those who are joining us virtually, thank you for being here in the room with us. Welcome to Cybersecurity, Emerging Risks for Manufacturers. I say that word emerging, and I know our subject matter expert, Peter, has said many times, Joe, emerging, but also real and present, and have been with us for a number of years. So it's kind of a blend of the two. At the beginning, I do want to call out Paul Menig and Business Accelerants, our sponsor for this morning's event. Just a quick bit of context. I, along with 7 other folks, formed a group called Empowering Oregon Manufacturing. So we've got 4 folks from Columbia Bank, Sherry Henson, Mike Forsey, Robin Dodge Little, and myself, Joe Connors. Looking at Karen from Acumen Executive Search. We've got Paul Menig from Business Accelerants. Looking at Tiffany Salzman from Candor Concepts. And then Julie Marquis from Key Process Innovations and an EOS implementer. And really what brought us together was a passion for manufacturing. And we realized manufacturing doesn't live in a silo. It touches construction companies, distributors. We've all seen what's happened to the supply chain. What Peter Adams, our presenter, brings to us today is he lives at the intersection of business, strategy, and technology. And what he helps us learn is when they work together, they help your organization perform at a more optimal level. So we really are honored to have Peter here with us today. I am going to share a few comments about Peter. I've known him for a number of years. I could probably do this from memory, but I don't want to overlook anything. He is Vice President, Business Strategy at Aldrich Technology. He's got an extensive technology and business background. He leads business strategy. Prior to Aldrich, I know he had his own firm for many, many years and was well thought of and continues to enjoy a terrific reputation. So he brings a 35-year background to his role at Aldrich Technology, and I'm just thrilled we have him here today. Peter, the floor is yours.
Nice lead in. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe and Paul, and everybody for having me here.
Okay.
All right, so today we're going to talk about cybersecurity. Before we jump into that, a little bit about Aldrich. So specifically my group in Aldrich is Aldrich Technology. So we are a division of Aldrich, and we do the various things on the board here. We have cybersecurity and software solutions. So we help companies figure out what they're trying to be when they grow up and make sure their systems and processes and the applications are aligned with that. We do a lot of work in process automation, data analytics, one of the newer areas we're getting into, leveraging many of the tools that are available in the market today. We've done a lot of merger and acquisition support over the years. Help companies decide how they're going to manage and lead IT, and manage IT services and our technology advisory. So today we're just going to talk about the cybersecurity piece of all that. So before we get started, I want to just set a little context. So the purpose of technology is only to do 3 things. I've never found a 4th thing yet. Doesn't mean it's not out there, but I've only found 3. It's to improve productivity, enable new capabilities, and mitigate risk. So today we're going to focus on risk mitigation and cybersecurity, but keep in mind that technology should do all 3 of these things. So every dollar we're going to spend in technology should do at least 1, if not all 3 of these things. So this is a good litmus test for your governance committees. All right, and just everybody keeps saying, well, we can either be secure or we can have productivity, but we can't do both. Productivity and cybersecurity, they are not mutually exclusive. You can have both at the same time. Well-designed security will enhance your productivity. Productivity in the absence of security, I would argue, when you get hacked, because it's not if, it's when you get hacked, you will lose a lot of productivity. So you can argue both halves of that, but they do go together. Okay, so first of all, I need to dispel some myths here. How many of you think you're too small to be a target for cyber attacks? Anybody? All of there's always one. So we're going to dispel some myths here. We're going to blow this away because you're not too small. Everybody on the internet has an IP address. We'll talk more about that later. All IP addresses are the same. We all get attacked at the same frequency. So you're all targets. And it doesn't matter how small you are. So cyber attacks happen daily. So, and all the time. They are, small businesses are particularly vulnerable because you don't have the tools, typically don't have the thinking on staff or in-house to have good defenses. Large companies spend more in cybersecurity defense than you probably have in revenue. In fact, I would argue probably more than all of us almost combined in revenue. Microsoft spends more in cybersecurity defense than all of us combined. So they can afford tools, techniques, and have the skills and knowledge and stuff on staff that we don't have access to. So we have to figure out how we're going to do this in the absence of that. So 60% of small and medium businesses close within 6 months of getting a major attack. It's a scary statistic. So how big a deal is this? Big deal. It can cost you your business. So in the last year, attacks increased by 424%. And it's increasing, the rate of increase is increasing again this year. So we're seeing more and more attacks all the time. All right, most of your small businesses think you're too small to be attacked. We just saw that. Unfortunately, not very many of you raised your hand. You couldn't see out there. You see the land. You know what to do. Okay, and then small businesses spend roughly $1 million to restore the business after the attack to what it was before it was attacked. $1 million. How are you going to do that? Where are you going to get that $1 million from? So talk a little bit about cyber insurance. I'm not a cyber insurance sales guy. That's Rick's job. So the threat landscape. So it's always evolving. So no matter what we do, there's always something new. Right? So we're always playing catch up to the perpetrators. Who are the perpetrators? Right, it used to be people had this vision like high school kids sitting in their underwear, hacking on their computers late at night, breaking into stuff. It's not like that anymore. These are professional organizations. They have buildings, they have offices, they have employees, they have break rooms. Right? They have the full get there, full companies. They just happen to be located typically in countries where we have no extradition treaties, so you can't get them. So their businesses, it's not individual people. They write programs that attack. It's not the individual person trying to attack. The program doesn't know you from NORAD. It just knows your IP address, and so you go back to it to see what you find. If it can get through your firewall, then it's going to have a field day in your network. So last year's cybersecurity thinking is inadequate. What we can do is cover the basics, cover the fundamentals to make sure we are as secure as we can be, but we always have to be paying attention to what's happening in the world. There are always new attacks, new vectors. Okay, threats are growing in number and complexity. It's not a static environment. So this means it's not a one and done. If you take the stuff I'm going to talk to you about today and you implement all of it and you think you're secure, you won't be tomorrow. Right? It's ongoing. You have to stay on top of this stuff. Okay? So IT departments around the globe are playing a never-ending game of catch-up. It's whack-a-mole. Right? They're either playing it better or worse, and you want to make sure you're playing that as well as you can, but you're always playing catch-up with the guys who are trying to get your network. So why do people do this? What are they after? Well, they're after money. Right? So that what they're trying to do is to steal your money or somehow compromise your employees, or take your information and sell it. At the end of the day, they're all after money. So what's this stuff for? Why would they want to do this? So the social security number is worth $1. So if you were to go, if you had let's say you evil cybersecurity hacker, and you went out there, you stole a couple million social security numbers, and you knew what you were doing, you can go to the dark web. I don't want to get too technical and stuff, but you can go to the dark web and you can actually auction off the social security numbers and you can sell them and you get about $1 a piece. So when you read in the newspaper, about these hacks that go on and say, oh, well, 30 million Social Security members compromised. You should be thinking, wow, somebody just made $30 million for what probably amounted to a day's worth of work, maybe. Pretty good return. This is why they do that. How about a driver's license worth $20? I mean, I don't want to read all these to you, but you go down to a complete medical record, which is worth $1,000. And you ever heard of a hospital being attacked, their information compromised? If they were after medical records at $1,000 a pop, you bet, right? We're talking real money here. So why does this happen? It happens because, not because IT people are bad, not because the systems aren't good, but because this is an incredibly complex problem to solve. And people try to approach it, first of all, like it's a technical problem. So the technology is the vector for the scam artists. Before we had computers, we had wire fraud, we had, the Pony Express used to get robbed. But this is not new stuff, it's just a new medium for that behavior. But we have very complex systems. So how big is your supply chain? Well, if you were to look inside the network, if you could, and you say, well, I see your Dell server sitting there in your rack. You go, well, okay, that's one thing. No, that Dell server is more than 250 different manufacturers, parts, and systems put into that one box. You see the one box, it's over 250 components in there. You really think anybody has the time or the capacity to do 100% testing of the relationship and the interrelations of all those components? No, they don't. It's not possible. You take a server. How about a switch in your network? How about the Microsoft operating system? Microsoft's over 1,000 vendors contribute to the Microsoft operating system. Do you think Microsoft tests every possible thing all the time? No, because they're always hitting, hacked. Right? 2 weeks ago, they had a 0-day virus and exploiting Microsoft Word. Right? So this kind of stuff happens. My point is the complexity of the environment that we're dealing with means that it's not possible to make this 100% secure. They won't say that. It is not possible to make this 100% secure. It's not a matter of if you're going to get attacked or if you're going to have a vulnerability. It's a matter of when. You need to know when you've been attacked. Okay. So I mentioned before about IP addresses, so we'll talk about this for a second. So you and everybody else that's on the internet has an IP address. That IP address is just one number different from anybody else's IP address. So if I were a hacker and I wanted to attack you, I would start with the IP address of 1, and then I would attack it just to see what kind of response I get. And when I'm done with that, I would go IP command by 1, attack address number 2, and IP number 3.
Oh, come on.
IP address. So what's interesting about that is 2 things. One, you can think of your IP address like the old white pages. I'm dating myself here. Who remembers the phone book? Okay. So the phone book, right? It translated names to phone numbers. So if you want to call everybody in the phone book, you would just start at page 1 and you could just call them all. Or if you had an automatic dialer, you would start at the first phone number, dial it, increment by 1, dial the next one, right? How many of you get like calls to renew the warranty in your automobile? Right? What are they doing? They're just dialing every phone number that's possible. They don't know it's you, right? They don't know they're calling the insurers. They just know it's a phone number. They don't care. So what's happening is they're out there attacking every IP address. So before the invasion of Ukraine, the average attacks were running 2,500 attacks per day. Post-Ukrainian invasion, it's 3,500 attacks per day per IP address. So if you were to have a firewall and you were to monitor that firewall and you were to look at the number of attacks, you would see somewhere in the range of 3,500 per day. That's the background noise. I'm not talking about, intentional hacking. I'm not talking about corporate espionage or anything like that. I'm talking about just general hacking. So it's a lot. Okay. So we're going to go through some terms, and we're talking about a lot of different kind of things in the cybersecurity space. So a 0-day exploit. You've all heard about that. You've seen the paper every once in a while. So a zero-day exploit basically means that it's an attack for which there is no known vector. We don't know how we got it. There's no protection, so nobody already has figured it out, so there's no defense against it. There's no way to identify it. They haven't figured out how to figure out what it is yet. And there's no fix for it. So if you are a victim of a zero-day attack, you're going to be a victim because there's no defense, there's no way to detect it, there's no way to stop it yet. So when those get announced in the paper, right, there's one that was said a couple weeks ago, thinking of FL, who spotted that for us, to send a note out to everybody. But when you get a zero-day attack, you have to take some actions, but mostly what you need to do is just be aware it exists. When Microsoft announces that, they announce not only to their customers and us that this exists, they're also now announcing to the world of hackers that this exploit exists. So you have a window of time where you are exceptionally vulnerable, so you have to be extra vigilant until a patch comes out, which yesterday Microsoft did release a patch for that. Okay. So different types of attacks. We're not going to cover all these because there's too many. We could have a whole class of days to go through all these things. But these are the common ones out there. We're going to talk about a few of them. And specifically, I'm going to talk about ransomware and phishing. Those are the two most common that our customers run into, but they seem to have a lot of interest in. Okay. Remember, these are all aimed at generating money for the attacker. So we talked earlier, we never joked about receiving a phone call to see if your auto warranty should be renewed. You ever played with them when they do that? Right? So what's the first question they ask you? What kind of car do you have? Well, don't you think that if they were calling me about my warranty having expired on my car, they would know what kind of car I have? Right? It's clearly that's a phishing attempt. They're after information about me. Right? What kind of car I drive, I'm sure they want to know address and want to know, maybe the vehicle ID number, driver's license. I don't know what they're going to ask. I never played with them further than that. But the point is, they're phishing, right? They want my information. They're going to try and sell it. Okay. So we were talking about here's phishing. And so this is, thank you to Paul, who sent me this email last week. So this was a phishing attempt he received. And so what we're going to do here, rather than dissect it in detail, we're going to go through and we're going to highlight a couple of things that are some commonalities. So one is, when you receive a phishing attempt, they're going to try and incite panic. Because when you are panicked, you are going to act irrational. And that's what they're after. They don't want you thinking, they just want you blindly acting. So they're going to try and incite panic. In this case, right, say account deactivation fraud warning, final warning. Right? Oh my gosh, I have to do something now or something's going to be turned off. So we're trying to create a sense of urgency with negative consequences. And lastly, they're going to try and incite action. They want you to do something. They're going to make it really easy for you to do the thing you shouldn't do. Click on the link. Okay.
Why is it they don't know how to spell? The action there, they misspelled verified, which is one of the things that pops out.
Yeah, I agree. So it used to be, as I said, right, a lot of these perpetrators live in countries that have no extradition. English is not their first language. And so you often see malformed English stuff. Don't count on that anymore. If they happen to have misspelled words, great. That's a great flag, but don't count on them doing that. Yeah. In fact, I'm going to have another example here. And that is perfect message, great, could have been from anybody. Nothing in the message to indicate that there was a problem based on the language. So that used to be one of the things to spot. It's still something to look at, but don't just keep that. Okay, here's another one. This one actually happened to me a couple days ago. I got a notice to upgrade my mailbox from reservation Paramount Hotel ISBU.com. I don't have a mailbox there. I've never heard of this. So what are they trying to do? They say, right? They're trying to make me panic. My mailbox is full. Okay, I don't know about you guys, I have like 5 or 6 different email accounts. Not that I want that many, I'm just gonna end up with them. And I go, oh my gosh, I got one that's full. Oh, I better do something, right? Right, they want me to panic. Urgency and consequences. If I don't act in the next 48 hours, they're gonna shut my email down and I'll lose it forever. Oh no. And they want me to act, right? They want me to click on this link, and it's very easy to do that. See the pattern here? Okay. We'll do this one more time. So this phishing attempt is a little bit more complex here, but this is a very nicely written note. Basically, what they're doing, there's inside panic here. And so they say, what they're trying to say is avoid delay, more stress, and extra wire charges. So it's like, okay, so if I'm a clerk in an accounting department, I get this, like, no, I can't for extra wire charges. I'd have to have approval for that, so I better do this real quick. Oh, and look how handy. They even gave me the bank wire information, so now I know how to wire them the money. That was really nice of them to do that, right? Oh, and the last thing, the action, not only wire me money, but send them the confirmation. So now they have all my bank information too. This is great, right? So the pattern, right? Panic, urgency and consequences, action. In this case, they're asking for information that no one should ever ask for in an email message. But these are clues. But why are we going through this? Because people are the best defense you have for preventing cyber problems. Right? People are the source of the problems. We are also the number one thing that can defend against them. Our vigilance, our diligence, our eyeballs, our common sense, that is our best weapon. Okay. Here's just some other random examples, mostly because I want you to know that this isn't an email only thing. So this one happens to be email. Just look at the address there, it's horrible. In this case, this is a foreign country. Why would I have entered into sweepstakes in Australia? I didn't, right? Click here to download, great, very easy. Click here to retrieve the voicemail message. This was coming in voicemail. This one down here, this one was also an email, right? Asking for information that's not appropriate. Should never send bank information. So,
yeah, Peter, one thing that we observe on the banking side is there seems to be a higher frequency of this panic, urgency, you need to act now when you have a changeover or a transition in financial leadership. So you've got a new CFO, a new controller. Are these folks just, how do they monitor that there are changes in personnel?
well, LinkedIn is a great example, right? So most people post either they are hiring on LinkedIn or that they have hired on LinkedIn. They announce a new person, right? That's a flag. So if I were to write a program and I wanted to go out and look for opportunities, transition would be an opportunity. That's a moment in time of confusion. So that's a great time if I wanted to release my program and go into tax something. That's a great thing to do.
Some of them are using Sales Navigator.
Sorry, what?
Some of them are using Sales Navigator. Notify me when these businesses have CFO changes.
So that's how they're not probably studying the newspaper to see the announcement. They don't know you. It's all automated. This information is all public. They're just correlating information from different sources to try and figure out when it's an opportune time. Transition is key. Anytime there's a major transition, they know there's going to be confusion and they're trying to take advantage of that. Remember, we're attacking human beings here. Technology is just the vector. Okay? And then over here is a voicemail or a text. So it comes in many different forms. It's not email only. So common thing, don't click on embedded links. Okay? That's the number one thing. They're always going to try and do some way to manipulate the human being with panic, urgency, consequences, and make action very easy and obvious for you to take. But be on guard. Okay. Now we're going to switch a little bit about ransomware. This is kind of I think this is the biggest threat we face today. When we get done with this little section, y'all are going to be scared. So Okay, so in September 2021, the Department of Treasury basically said that if you pay ransom, you are potentially aiding and abetting terrorist organizations. Okay, it's not law yet, but it's heading in that direction. So if you pay, you could actually be aiding and abetting terrorists. That is a problem. So I don't know how we're going to deal with this as we go forward, but just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Okay, in 2021, we're $20 billion in ransoms paid. Think about that. That's a pretty good enterprise. Okay, that was in 2021. It doubled. It's going to double in 2022. Actually, it's going to be more than double in 2022. So this is big time money. 37% of businesses were hit last year. That's a lot. 37%. 32% of them paid the ransom. And I'm going to skip the next one, but 65% of the data. So if you paid the ransom, you only got 65% of your data back. So I ask you, if you got 65% of your finance system back, how valuable is that to you? You get 65% of your transactions. You don't get 65% of your G&A. 65% of your charges, 5% of whatever. Is that valuable? No. If you don't get all of that, it's pretty much worthless. So we're talking about mechanisms for both protecting and recovering. $1.85 million is the average cost to recover. And it only takes 4 hours to successfully infiltrate and encrypt your system. So ransomware people, they are always writing newer and better programs to do this. It's very effective. And the challenge is multifold on this. One is ransomware doesn't look like anything. It doesn't send you an email. It doesn't create panic and negative consequences. It doesn't have bad English written in it. It's silent. All people did was go to a website and browse and maybe click on, a picture, right? Ransomware can be embedded inside of the graphic image. How would you know? You don't. So most reputable websites scrub their websites regularly to make sure that their images aren't hacked and aren't embedded. But there are websites out there that aren't quite so scrupulous. And unfortunately, they tend to be gaming sites, sports sites, porn sites, free software download sites, things like that, free services. These tend to be the sites that are most often compromised from ransomware attacks. But you can't recognize it. All you can do is avoid those kind of websites. So once your local system is encrypted, it only takes 4 hours to encrypt. Then the old days, they would pop up a notice of some sort saying, "Oh, you've been hacked." Okay, that's great. At least you knew. So, okay, 4 hours went by, and one computer was hacked. That's great. Okay, I can. It's only a laptop. Swiped it out. Sorry. Well, they got onto that. That wasn't a big threat. So they started attacking the whole network. Anything they could find on the network, right? Encrypt the whole network and send you a ransom. But if they did it in a fairly short period of time, okay, so I reset my network, I restore my data from yesterday, and I lose a day's transactions, maybe, but I can recover it. What if they waited 3 months to tell you, or a year, or 2 years, which is what's happening now? They're waiting a long time to notify you that you've been encrypted and hacked. Can you go to a backup that's a year old and recover and lose a whole year's worth of transactions and financials and everything? And data, transactions, contracts, all the sales information, all the customer information, you lose all that? No, it's horrible. So now we're gonna add one more layer on top of that. They're blackmailing you. So because they've been in your system for a year, or however long, and they've had access to your data, they take pieces of your data. Typically, they're looking for things like high liability, like your HR data, and they're going to release it publicly if you don't pay. They're blackmailing you. This is horrible. This is a real problem. And there's no prevention at the moment. It's 100%. We just have to be diligent, and we have to be rigorous, and we have to be careful, and we have to know what you're doing to make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen to you. It will shut you down as a business. Okay, so the basics of how to protect yourself. Whether your IT is on-prem or in the cloud, doesn't matter. Right? The concept's the same. We want to keep the unwanted people out of our environment, out of our data, out of our systems, out of our network. We want to keep unwanted programs out. Remember, I said the hackers writing programs. We got to keep the programs out that are unwanted. We got to keep the data accessible to the people and the programs that need it. Right? Productivity, right? If we shut it all down so people can access it, highly secure, we wouldn't be able to use it. We wouldn't do any good, so we won't have it in the first place. Think of the money saved, no IT at all. Okay, but this is bigger than IT, right? Remember, this kind of hacking is new because of technology, but the concepts are old. You think when you were back on pads and pencils and abacuses and all that kind of stuff that hacking wasn't going on? Of course it was. This is just a new way of doing it. Okay? We have to keep the networks and the systems running and available and secure. We have to prevent interruptions to our systems so that we're not having loss of access to our data. And we have to keep the data true. Wouldn't it be a problem if I were in agriculture and I'm growing my crop and somebody seeded my data with indications maybe of E. coli infestation and I didn't know it? And then a year later, somebody says, oh no, they had an E. coli issue. You go, oh, we go, yeah, look, we do our own research and our own data, and it shows right here we had an E. coli issue that we knew about, and we didn't disclose it. Big problem, right? So that's more targeted type hacking, but it happens. That's a real life example, by the way. Okay, moving on. So how are we going to protect our business and our customers and our employees, the people we care about in our ecosystem? So this list doesn't seem obvious. I'm not giving you a list of like technical things to do. We'll get to that part. But right now, let's talk big picture stuff, right? IT governance. So IT governance is very misunderstood. This is not a user group. It's not a complaint organization. It's a very small committee in your business that decides how and when to leverage technology to enable your vision and mission. How are we going to leverage technology to make sure it's coherent across the enterprise? That's what we mean by IT governance. And if you don't have something like that, you don't know how you're going to make decisions going forward. If you don't know how you're going to make decisions going forward, you're going to have a piecemeal approach to things. Whenever you have a piecemeal approach to things, you have gaps and holes. This is a security problem. Establish a security policy. When you do that, we'll talk about this more in detail, but there's a bunch of existing frameworks you can operate. What frameworks are appropriate for your business and your market? Pick a framework. Don't make something up on your own. Okay? You need to educate your people. And again, remember we talked about this thing, people problem. Technology is the vehicle, but the problem ultimately is a people problem. They're after people data. They want to sell your data. Or they want to compromise your people. They want after your money. You have to have an IT strategy. So I title it business strategy, right? If you don't have a strategy, you don't have a plan, you don't know where you're going. How are you going to get there? You don't know what to do. You don't know how to think. You don't know how to make decisions. Okay? Pay attention to the details. Most of the hacking that occurs that you read about in the newspaper, the big companies. Remember the Sony hack a few years ago? Sony came in and basically compromised, a number of their upcoming unreleased movies. Well, that hack turned out to be a weak password on an unused admin account. It's just details. That's bad administration. Right? Okay, so that do that. You have to execute and you have to verify. Do what your plan says and verify. Did we do that? What else changed? Right? Wireless routers are ubiquitous. Like you can go to Best Buy or any store and buy a wireless router. How often do you find we find them regularly. People put them underneath their desk and plug them in the network and turn them on because they want to connect with their iPhone or whatever else devices they have. And they think they're just being clever and helpful. Well, when you put out a device like that in your network, you're now broadcasting your secure network to the world to access. You just created an enormous security hole. How would you find that? When you have to be doing constant testing and looking to see because it doesn't show up. Right? It might be out there for months before it gets detected otherwise. Cyber insurance. So cyber insurance won't prevent stuff, but it gives you a big pot of money to use to fix stuff when it happens. Okay. I also urge people to engage in the risk department, their insurance carriers, to get their take on what are good cybersecurity practices, what are things they care about and they see. Remember, this is changing over time. So leverage your insurance companies so that you can use them to help you figure out what's going on. Hey, engage professionals. Cybersecurity is not something to be left up to the people who mean well but don't have the real skill and competence to do it. Okay? We need real help here. Unfortunately, this is more complex and more difficult to do than often. Okay? Rely on competence rather than your personal personalities, tenures, relations, etc. Okay. So back to the plan. You need a plan. So if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a plan, if you don't know how to make decisions, you don't know how to act, you don't know what matters. So we start with a plan. A plan should have the following things in it. An infrastructure security policy. So what's acceptable use of our network, what's not acceptable use? How should people behave? When we're dealing with people, we got to tell them how they should behave, how they should engage in our network, what's allowed, what's not allowed. What regulatory environments do we have to be compliant with? In the medical space, we have to worry about HIPAA, FDA. If we're manufacturing, we're selling to the military. Do we have ITAR? Do we have DFARS? What are all these frameworks that we have to operate in? We have to make our people aware, right? Train people, make sure they know what to look for, what to spot, how to act, how to behave, what's appropriate. Okay. Vulnerability scans. Remember, we talked about the wireless access point. If you don't do a vulnerability scan, you probably wouldn't get to that. It might be a new network for months before you know. I can tell you from personal experience, it might be your network for many months before you figure it out if you get doing vulnerability scans. You need a third-party vendor management program. Why? Well, if your major supplier gets hacked and gets shut down, what does that do to you? What if your major supplier sends you a falsified email reportedly from them, asking you to pay them, but it has a different wire number in it, and you end up paying somebody else? You got a problem, right? So your vendors are a problem. They are a potential source of risk. You have to understand how you're going to vet them. How do you know that they have taken appropriate precautions? You should do a risk assessment or a gap analysis. Understand where you are now, where you should be. And that gap in between is what you need to work on. Knowing that you need to do this on an ongoing basis because it's always changing. It's not a one and done. Great stuff. Okay. So you should have an incident response plan. Now, we're not going to tell you like what yours should be, but these are the kinds of concepts you want to think about. When you have a cybersecurity incident, time is not your friend. The more time goes by, the more damage can happen, the more costly the recovery. So you want to act quickly. This is not the time to try and figure it out. You should already have a plan. You and your people should know what to do. So as soon as you have an incident, activate your plan. This isn't about bureaucracy. It's going to be something short and quick if necessary. You've got to know what you're doing, right? And so what kind of things might be in your plan? Well, you might have protocols for different types of attacks, right? If you are a victim of ransomware, it's different than if you're a victim of phishing. Okay? You might call an incident response company, depending on the severity of the attack. You might notify your cyber insurance carrier, right? Some carriers, if you wait to notify them, that wait will cost you the insurance. You have to notify them In the moment that you know that there's a real problem, even if you're not sure, it's probably a good idea to notify them anyway. Make sure they're aware. I mean, one thing, when should you notify the FBI? Right? You know that if you're the victim of a cyber attack and you're dealing under the ITAR or DFARS or any of those programs, if you don't know how and when to notify the FBI, you have a real problem. So talking about some of the standard products. So you don't have to make this stuff up on your own. Here's some great standards that are out there, some great regulatory environments. The trick is to take these standards and your business and marry them together in a way that makes sense for what you're after. So that you don't get the bureaucratic overhead of these things, but you can leverage that in a way to actually enhance your operations and make you more productive. That's why we build plans and programs around cybersecurity. It's not just a bunch of technical tasks. Okay? These standards are kind of the core of almost all these is the National Institute on Standards and Technology, or NIST. And so a lot of these other ones are derivatives or related to that. So if you don't have anything else, you have no idea where to start, A, you should ask for some professional help. But B, you should always start with NIST, and probably their CFS, which is just their basic level security standard for most businesses. Okay, I'm not suggesting you have to follow the law to a letter of everything they say, but it's a framework for thinking. Okay. The Department of Labor. So who here has a 401k plan in their business? Okay. So if you have a 401k plan, you have to have a cybersecurity program in place, not just to cover the HR, the employee data, but to cover your entire organization. This is now DOL's requirements, right? 12 requirements. So it's not just something it's a good idea. We have to do this. In 401k, you don't want to mess with that. There's a lot of liability. So one of the concepts that we talk about routinely is the segregation of the different functions. The people, in order to be productive, need to have access to the data they need to have to do their jobs. But they don't need access to the rest of the data. In fact, the rest of the data is a distraction and noise, a potential problem if something were to happen. So you want to make sure that you've matched the people, their roles, their job function, to their access to the internal systems and the data. We call that segregation of data. It goes by some other names, but that's the concept, right? This is the plain old military concept. So segregate and control access. When people are transferred, so if you've got an employee that's been around for a while and you're transferred up and you keep growing, they keep adding access. Almost never does somebody remove access they no longer need. So how many, I see CFOs, and how many CFOs have direct access to their ERP systems? Yeah, actually, most CFOs at a high level, they don't need access to the ERP system. They need access to the data so they can do their analysis and reporting. They don't actually need access to the transactions in the ERP system. That's what the controllers are for. Right? So you can segregate that data, you can segregate that access. So when we're doing analytics, we need to access the data across the enterprise. So in order to do that, we have to store our data in a way that it's accessible, but it has to be accessible still in a secure fashion. You don't want every program accessing all of the data, and segregated and controlled. And this kind of sounds like a non sequitur. We have to control the access, and yet we have to have broad access. So it has to be measured. This is where as business owners, how do you perceive risk comes into play. You need to make that decision knowingly rather than have your IT department make it for you. Right? You want to know about the risks you're assuming. What level of access do we want to grant? What do we need to control? That's a business decision, not a technology decision. So where do we see this kind of data that needs to be controlled usually? But HR. Right? Lots of liability around HR data. Finance and accounting data. Sometimes contracts. Contracts can definitely be something that needs to be Intellectual property. Believe it or not, we do a lot of work in Silicon Valley with venture-backed startups. Most of them don't even think about protecting their intellectual property. I know, weird, it's the way it goes. How about trade secrets? So all data is not the same, right? We don't treat data ubiquitously. Different data have different levels of protection. Okay, we're gonna play a little game. I'll call this the password game. Everybody knows that, everybody hates passwords, but it's our first line of defense. It's the best defense against hackers or anything, right? We keep everything secure. So Microsoft default password is 8 characters long. So let's see how that stacks up. We'll roll here. So if we had a 7-character password of bankers, right? Just simple word bankers. How long do we think it would take to crack that?
3 seconds.
3 seconds. How about 200 milliseconds?
Wow.
That's effectively instant. And this would be done with publicly accessible tools that you can download from Google. You right now can search, crack my password hacking tools, things like that, and you can download the tools that do this. These are free and available to you. So we all heard that you have to make your passwords complex. There's letters, symbols, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, all that gibberish in there. So if we take the word bankers and just add some other funny stuff in there, still 7 characters long. How long does it take to crack that password? It's almost the same, a whole lot of 22 seconds. It's better, but not by a lot. Okay, football, 8 characters, effectively instantly. So why? Single common word, one word, it's a dictionary word. Those are hackable in any length, almost instantly. But you can make it a little funny with some different characters in it. It can hold 6 days. 6 days, does that sound like a good password to anybody that seems secure enough? I don't think so. So I won't belabor this too long. But we get down here to 15 characters, and you have a phrase. It's about time with spaces and punctuation in it. Okay, 4 billion years. Okay. So we go from 7 characters to 200 milliseconds, effectively double the length, and now we're at 4 billion years. Okay, and if you make it even weirder with some other uppercase and lowercase stuff, we now get to 82 billion years. So the point here is really twofold. Number one, length matters in passwords a lot. Matters more than complexity or anything else. But complexity is good, but length is more important. Now, let's look at passwords. We all know that we have seen, we've received the emails, whatever it might be, that, our password's been compromised because somebody got into some password database somewhere and they released our passwords. So a couple of comments on that. Number one, 2-factor authentication. A password alone can be compromised because it can be stolen out of another password database and used against you, even if it's hugely long, even if it's like this one down here at the bottom, right? You can still be compromised. 2-factor authentication is the way to solve that problem. That is currently the best, most trusted method for securing passwords out there. It's a combination of a password you know, plus a code off of the device you have, like your cell phone. That combination is virtually unhackable. The nice thing about it is if somebody's trying to hack your password, you're going to get a bunch of notices on your phone that, here's your code, here's your code, here's your code. You're going, what? Why is this happening? Because somebody's hacking the password here somewhere. So you get notified. So what do we recommend? So we recommend at least 14 characters long, minimal complexity. That'll take, a long time. It'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of 37,000 years for passwords. Add 2-factor authentication to that, and you're don't use the same password everywhere. So vary it. Right? If you have one password that's used everywhere, and that password gets compromised at any site, now all of your sites have been compromised. And it only takes a hacker seconds once they have your password to start going across the internet and spewing it everywhere and seeing what they can get into. So you want to compartmentalize, limit that exposure. Okay. And we're going to go through 16 things that you should do. Now, this is more on the technical level, but there's a whole bunch of stuff here. So, cybersecurity awareness training. Got to make your people aware. This is number one. You have a people problem, not a technology problem. You can't have your IT people just fix this stuff and make you secure. It won't happen. Okay. Strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication. Okay. Keep your software current and up to date. Right. When Microsoft releases patches and updates to their operating system, most of the time is security. Yeah, they throw features and all kinds of other junk in there, fine. But the critical updates, they are around security. You want to make sure your systems, your servers, workstations, laptops, everything are always on current release, always on the latest, and make sure they're patched and up to date. You need a strong anti-spam and malware. So spam, like everybody gets spam, right? You see all the junk comes in your email. You want to keep that to a minimum, right? It's noise. Noise distracts people. When they have too much noise to deal with, people make mistakes. So have a good anti-spam program. A good anti-spam program also has some antivirus capability in it, so it filters out the previously payloads that have viruses in it. The anti-malware. Malware is malicious software that's not quite the same thing as a virus. And so you want to make sure you have some tools in your network that allow you to detect your malware.
Peter, just a question on point number 2. I know we are required, we now have multi-factor authentication just to log into the company network. How are you seeing that more and more, or are companies behind the curve on adopting it?
It's a mix,
Yeah.
but more and more adopting it because two-factor authentication across the spectrum, like not just your email or your browser, your website, but even internal. Two-factor authentication, I think, should be the standard at the time. Right? There's a whole bunch of new initiatives out there. They're experimenting with new and better ways to do authentication. That's great. They're not commercially viable yet today because they haven't sorted out who's going to do what. But right now, good, strong password.
Can I follow up on that? So my Mac is set up nicely, and my Mac is connected with my iPad, is connected with my phone and stuff. So I have this two-factor authentication. So I log into a website on my Mac, but a text message comes to my phone, which is connected to my Mac, and all I do is click, and it automatically fills in.
Right.
So if somebody other than me were to be sitting at my desk,
Right. If
it
they
would be worthless.
if they have your Mac, which has the password already in there, and they happen to have your phone.
No, the phone automatically goes automatically to the Mac because the Apple world loves to have you be able to work from anywhere.
Yeah, that's probably not a good practice. Right? It shouldn't automatically happen that way. You should have to go to your phone and you have to click there to approve it, not on your Mac. So
I'll put a good lock on that.
all right. Firewall, network traffic filter. So remember, one of the things we talked about was ransomware. When you get a ransomware infection, and all the old ransomwares are still out there, but they didn't go away. So they're still out there. One of the first things they do is they try and phone home to get an encryption key to back encrypt your laptop or your computers or whatever. So the network traffic filtering blocks what I call a phone home function. You may still have the ransomware in your computer, but if it's not activated, that's okay, sort of. But it'll live there long enough that your good antivirus programs can now detect it. So it's a key component in battling ransomware. Secure backups. The other way we combat ransomware, your backups should be like the 3-2-1 methodology, right? So there's 3 versions of your backup, copies of your backup. So you can have one in the cloud, one on-prem, say on some network device, and maybe one on an offline network device locally or whatever, but 3 copies. One should be completely removed from the network. So if your network will get compromised, your backups are still secure because they're disconnected. And this is not hard to do, nor is it expensive these days. You can store the stuff at Amazon, Google, AWS, etc. Offsite storage is now relatively inexpensive. It's cheaper than tape storage. So I do recommend that. Disaster, we should have a disaster recovery gate. If I'm storing my backups offsite, so let's say there's different ways to do backup. So I can back up individual files, or I can back up my whole system. You want to control. But if I take my whole system and I back it up and I store that at Amazon, for instance, and I have a problem, the meteor hits, the fire goes off, the water sprinkler, there's always a water sprinkler in the server room, right over the server room. You notice that? So if that sprinkler goes off, right, and your system is now dead, what are you gonna do? Well, if my backups were all at Amazon, I could stand up my entire network at Amazon and just connect them to the Amazon cloud and have my business run. Right? It's no longer dependent on the physical infrastructure that's on. This is what disaster recovery is about from a technical perspective. It's not hard and it's not particularly expensive anymore. It used to be hugely expensive, not the case. Okay? Now, the next level of that is business continuity, which is a business issue, not a technical issue. Because that deals with things way beyond just the technical space. And you should also have a business continuity plan. How do I stay in business and keep working in the event of various kinds of disasters, which may or may not have anything to do with technology? Okay, compartmentalized access. We talked about that before. There's our antivirus, and list that separately. You need to have a good antivirus program. There are a lot of placebos out there. What's that? There are a lot of antivirus programs, some of which are very popular with major name brands on them. They're pretty much worthless. Okay, we need to have a good antivirus program. Okay.
How do you know?
You need to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing. Now they all market well, right? They all look good, but some of them just don't function particularly well. Unauthorized code execution, that's kind of a fancy technical word, but basically means if it's a program that you don't know about and it's going to try and execute and run under an environment, you need to stop it from running until you can decide whether that's legitimate or not. Okay. If I were to stop unauthorized codes programs from executing, then ransomware might fall in that category. It's not authorized to do, it's not authorized to work like that. No. Right. So I would stop it. So I can stop it fundamentally at this level. This is another key defense. Laptops and encryption. So this is a real challenge when COVID hit. How many of us put data, company data on our laptops and took our laptops home? Pretty much everybody, right? I mean, we all have to. If our laptops were encrypted, we created an enormous potential liability for our employers. If you encrypt the laptops, then effectively that liability goes to zero. Just by encrypting. Encrypting is built into Windows 10, Windows 11, the Macintosh operating systems. There's nothing magic about it. So we need to be encrypting our laptops. Any computer that travels offsite or is in an area of our business that may be accessible by the public or that we're concerned about should be encrypted. Okay. Mobile device manager. Everybody's got cell phones, right? How do we manage these connecting into your network? I'll tell you, one of the common vectors for infection right now are iPhones. Who connects up their iPhone to the Starbucks Wi-Fi? Everybody? Right. So when you connect your phone to the Starbucks Wi-Fi, anything that's on that wireless network can now be downloaded onto this phone. But without your knowledge, without your approval. So then I take this phone into my office and I connect it to my wireless network in the office, right? What do you think happens? Anything that was on this phone now is on the office network. And it bypassed the firewall. Bypassed a lot of the features and functions and security stuff we just put in place. So you got to learn how to manage these things. Cell phones, with only very rare exceptions, should never be allowed on an internal secure network. It should only be allowed on a guest network. Right? Something that's outside, that's insecure, that only needs internet access. I don't need to access my internal file storage on my iPhone. Right? So, mobile device management matters. Mobile devices restricted to the guest network. When you're browsing the websites, everybody knows to look for the S here, right? For secure. Okay? So if it doesn't have that on it, it's not a secure website. Doesn't mean it's a bad website, it's just not secure. Diligent administration. IT budgets are always compressed, right? IT people usually are asked to do more than from what their point of view they think they can do. So they're always figuring out how to answer the questions that leaders are asking them to do while doing it with fewer resources. So when they have a new project to do that's really exciting, how much time do you think they spend doing administering the system, which is slow, dull, boring, tedious work? They don't do that. They don't play on stuff that's more exciting. So no matter what goes on, you have to have diligent administration. But when employees leave your organization, you have to remove their accounts. You don't want those to lack. Okay. And lastly, cybersecurity insurance. So again, this won't solve the problem, but it gives you a big bucket of money to use if you have a problem. You want to make sure you talk to your carrier, get good coverage, and make sure you know the limits and all that kind of stuff. And beyond that, you talk to your insurance people for more details. Okay, employees, we're winding down here, so we'll wrap this up. So what are people doing when they're not at work? Well, for the most part, we don't care, except we do. What if they're posting information on Facebook and other social media? We had a customer that had a big celebration party for a brand new machine they just built, highly secure machine. You get everybody lined up in front of it, they take a high-res picture of it and post it on Facebook. They just compromised their intellectual property or trade secrets. That was a problem. Okay, so you have to think about how you're going to manage this. What do you want your people to do now? So what do they share? Make sure with you, your vendors, how they educate your employees. How do you know how to interact with them? When you want to pay a bill, right, do you know what the proper process is for approving and authorizing that transaction and paying that vendor? If the vendor says to you, oh yeah, I'll just send you all this stuff in email and that's how we do things, you have a weak vendor. Okay, so if we took all the advice I've just given you today and you implemented everything, would you be secure? You'd be more secure, right? Because you're on a path to ever more security. But keeping in mind, productivity matters too. You've got to have productivity is job number one. Security is 1.1. Okay, so you're on a path to being more secure. And just quick takeaways, productivity and security, have a plan. You don't know what you're doing, you can't get there. You don't know how to act. You'll be delayed and you'll suffer greater consequences. Good cybersecurity defenses. Verify and test to know that what you're doing is working. Bring confidence where needed. Like, this is a specialty. It's not something most people know about or think about. Explore your cybersecurity insurance. We can't underemphasize that enough. You really do need a big bucket of money if something happens. Now, the last thing. So everything we talked about, what's the incremental IT spend? What we talk about really expensive? I argue the answer is no. The incremental spend is fairly true. You are already doing most of the work in IT. You're just not doing it in a way that's coherent, and you're missing some big parts of it. So I didn't say you had to go out and buy a whole bunch of fancy software and fancy systems, firewalls, and all that kind of stuff. You need to think about it differently, approach security differently. It's not about the dollar you spend, it's about how you think about it. With that, to the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. I'm going to add a takeaway to Peter's takeaways, and that is, I took away it's a people problem. And I know I'm tested periodically at my employer, and occasionally I will click on an embedded link, and that IT team emails me back saying, Joe, you shouldn't have done that. So it is a people problem.
I've got a simple question.
Sure.
I had a previous employee that had a business name, email address, and she left, and apparently she's using that business name to do business with Amazon. And I have called Amazon, and I have sat on the phone for hours being directed to their legal team, and absolutely nothing is being done. How do you navigate these days where you're basically talking to the whole, and people, even if you can get a phone number, nobody really answers it?
Well, your question actually spans a couple of different things. So when you have employees that leave the organization to shut their email down, email it down and access down, so they no longer have.
Well, they have, that's why I'm getting the email, but she's
Right.
still obviously using it.
Right. Separate from that is, I could set up, an Amazon account and do business under whatever name I want to. They would check with various registrars to make sure that the business name is not in use and actually owned by me, unless I'm scamming the system. Right? So you actually have a legal problem thing with that, not just a technical problem. And when you call Amazon or any of the major providers like that, it's very hard to get through to people who can actually do stuff.
Yeah, I actually had a legal letter, an email sent, and still nothing.
Yeah.
So
It's a problem.
it's a problem.
It's not a common problem though, but it's not nothing. Okay. Julie?
You have your backup off-site at Amazon Web Services. How do you know that that's?
So you can look at Amazon's various policies if you wanted to read through that. It's probably 75, 80 pages. I don't know how big that policy is. It's enormous. But it goes through all the requirements and everything they have, and then they've been certified by third parties, the SOC 2 or whatever SOC requirement they have, basically verify that their environment is as secure as they claim. You can also just look at news and look at the internet, do some searches, and find out that the last time somebody had resources at Amazon that were hacked, or Microsoft, or Google, or whatever. You'll find it's actually quite rare that the hacks that occur aren't their direct infrastructure, but perhaps some other avenue, which is a weakness on the company's part. Valley got some bad.
Yeah, this brings up a really good point about cloud services. Amazon is an easy one to go check. Everyone knows Amazon, but I can tell you I've worked with clients who found some file sharing website and it was cheap. And I went out and did a little bit of investigation and found out, guess what? They were owned by a foreign nation state. And there was another one that was in the news. They were offering free network penetration tests. And it was owned by a company out of China. So you do have to have some level of investigation when you do go to the cloud to make sure that the services you're getting are legitimate. And I would stand behind Amazon and Microsoft, just two of the larger ones that have some of the, well, if not the most secure networks in the world.
This gets to, I stole this Bell slide on third-party vendor management. So you have to have a way of vetting your vendors, Amazon being one of them, to make sure that they are okay and meet your approval and your standards.
So how do you feel about Zoom being owned by, that's a China-based company and it's ubiquitous? How does that play in cybersecurity?
Well, so you're going to ask my opinion on this. So if I were presenting stuff that I thought had lots of liability around it, Zoom would not be my first choice.
Yeah.
I think Zoom's a fine service, and for presentations like this, where there's effectively no liability at all, I'm not telling you guys what to do. Zoom's fine. But if I want to do a highly secure type of video conference, I'd probably use Teams instead. Other questions?
You mentioned CMMC and the Department of Defense restrictions. Are you working with anybody in the in defense?
Yeah, we have a number of clients in that space working on CMMC certifications, DFARS, FARS, and all that stuff.
Any questions from our virtual attendees?
The only question that we've received thus far is about the slide deck and reporting, which we won't have available after the session.
Good question. A lot of us have been hacked already. But Social Security, any way you can get it back, or is it just on the dark web and you're?
Once it's on the dark web, no, you're probably not getting it back. You can take various actions to make it more difficult, but I don't think you can put that genie back in the box. No, you know any what
Yeah.
recommended actions on that?
Was it the Social Security Administration who contacted you?
No, the state of Oregon
It was the
unemployment
state of
office. Someone filed for unemployment. I
That's
heard
been
that.
a big problem.
I heard roughly 35% of the country that's unemployed.
And they'll usually, I believe, they'll issue you a different, have they issued you a
No.
different? You do, you have to contact those.
Makes me wonder about our unemployment statistics and stuff. Peter, I work in Daimler Trucks, okay, $100 billion a year in sales, okay, they can do anything and everything. A lot of the companies we're dealing with are maybe somewhere between $5 and $50 million a year in sales. One company I worked with, okay, they outsource payroll, they outsource to a CPA, some of their financial stuff. They had one IT person for the roughly 35 employees. They certainly had cell phones out in the field for their salespeople and things. I'm not sure that I can help them implement something like this for no dollars, no time, no effort. What are your thoughts as you get smaller and how you do these things?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, size doesn't matter in terms of your risk. Right. So that's a problem, right? The big companies can afford more than small companies can. So you have to have a plan. You got to be able to scale it down to your organization such that it makes sense. I didn't say that it's going to be $0, but the incremental spend is going to be fairly low. You're already having that situation. You already have an IT person. You're already spending some money. I'd be surprised if they don't have some third-party IT people that are also contracting in to help, because it's not possible for one IT person to have the breadth of knowledge to do a decent job. So somewhere in that pool of money and the systems and everything else they're spending is probably enough to eke out a few dollars to spend on this instead. And I think they get much better lift on this.
When you mentioned the cell phone and it doesn't need access to this or that and stuff, when the owner of the $30 million company comes to you and says, I need access to all those systems for my phone, that's the way I work. And the IT guys will put you in the box, right?
Right. Well, that's exactly what happens. But if there are ways to secure that iPhone and secure the connection, that does incur a little bit of cost, but mostly it's setup and configuration. And, this is where the problem is, right? If it's just the one IT guy, they know what they know, but they don't know broadly enough all the different things that they can do to protect their organization. So they need help. And that's where, firms like ours come into play, or others. You gotta get some help.
To the point over there, so a lot of people use QuickBooks online and a lot of other things online and stuff, and you don't know who they're using for their network services and things. And if you're that small, you don't have, like AWS, the ability to send out to your vendors and their vendors, and, get all of those assurances and things. Any thoughts on what you might do? Stay away from startups?
Well, stay away from, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So when you get the free network assessment tool, or you get the free web hosting, or the free whatever it is, they're going to make their money some way.
Nothing's free.
Stay.
This
is good. That's good.
I say that free is an acronym. Finding revenue everywhere else.
Yes. But notwithstanding, right, when you just pick major players, right, if you stick with Microsoft, Amazon, QuickBooks Online, right, they have already done their homework. They have secure environments. They couldn't be the size they are and the scale they are if they weren't. You'd be reading about them in the newspaper all the time about being hacked, and you don't. Right? So that's probably the best advice for the really tiny companies. But I do think a consultation and checkup occasionally is a really good idea and money well spent. But I think they can eke it out of their existing budget. Most IT departments that we work with in small companies are spending money on things they don't need to spend money on, and they're not spending money on things they should. So I think we can take the same pool of money and rearrange it a little bit and get much better with it.
and I'd like to supplement that, even the smaller companies, should they have, and hopefully they do, of course, Rick and I will promote that as an insurance policy, cyber insurance policy in place. It would supplement what Peter is doing, because a lot of insurance carriers will provide, as part of the premiums that a company pays, some of the things that he was suggesting. So whether there's resources there for pre-claim risk mitigation, or the post-claim resources that will provide you with the forensics and the PR work and the stuff that's going to help you with determining all the things that need to happen if you do have a claim. So the insurance policy is important because it does provide you with that bucket that you were referring to, but it also provides you with pre-claim and post-claim resources, which are vital. So if you're spending $10,000 or $20,000 a year on a $1 million cyber insurance policy, and the cost of a ransomware attack is $350,000, you've just gotten back what you would have gotten had you not had that cyber insurance.
The other thing some of our smaller clients are doing is they're seeking grants for cybersecurity work, and they are being approved, so they're finding buckets of money elsewhere to pay for some of this stuff.
I deal a lot with Industry 4.0 or maybe 5.0 later, so it's not just computers now, it's also the sensors and the actuators on the conveyor lines. You know, you talk about CFARs in the military and stuff like that. You know, it's possible that they could change the program for machining a part on a missile, and you wouldn't know it. And then, you know, you come out later and you've got a problem. So there's more to it now than just the desktop computers. It's every computer in the
We talked a little bit about compartmentalization. So when your internal networks, right, so your manufacturing line, you don't want that on the same network as, say, your business administrative network. They do different things. So we had a client locally here who was basically making polysilicon. They turned the process from being a discrete process where you make basically one ingot at a time to a continuous process where this machine just spit out ingots all day long. The crucible, where they're doing all the big furnace work, the thing ran at somewhere close to 5,000 degrees. You would not want the control system for that publicly available on the internet, right? Because if that got out of hand, it's basically a bomb. Mm-hmm. And so you need to make sure that you design your environment so that the environment architecturally is sound and secure. And it doesn't, you know, to the point, it doesn't cost a lot of money to do that. It's just about the thinking, right? Instead of having one network, I'm going to divide it and I'm going to have two separate networks. I can manage that on the network switch I already bought anyway, so I don't have to buy additional equipment. I just have to configure it. I got to know to do that. So what I'm trying to get at is just the thinking that's missing, not so much the dollars.
I do have one question for you. So I've had some people recommend to me like one password. You log into one website and then you can save all of your passwords. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're actually handy tools. You know, whether it's 1Password or LastPass, or there are a bunch of them out there that do that. I stick with one of the top providers. The benefit of that is you can keep your master password, which should be your password. We went through, okay, it should be nice and long. I'd add complexity to that, but it's something that you should be able to remember and not have to write down. As soon as you have to write down your password, it's not secure. Right? So you want to make sure that you have a good, strong password, but inside one of those tools, you can now keep all the passwords for all the other sites you have, and you can manage it through there. I think those are pretty handy utilities.
Can I share a white hat hacker taught me something?
Sure.
So my password is a song. I sing a song. I can remember that song. I can remember it, and it's the first letter of each word, some numbers. And the beginning 3 or 4 letters are always like the name of the website that I'm trying to access. So I only have to remember one song, and I never have to write it down. And it's got like @ signs in it. And my white hat hacker friend told me that I would never get hacked. And so far, he's been right.
Yeah,
So just wanted to share it.
Now we all know your pattern.
Right.
So.
You know my pattern? You do not know my song. You're not going to sing it. And I'm not going to sing it.
Yeah, how much few words?
Peter, thank you very much.
Awesome.
You have convinced me that I use Flash ID with my password protection, but it's only 10 letters with one special character in it. I'm going to add 4 more characters to it, so it's not 10, it's 14, and add a few more little things to there. So thank you all for coming in person. Thank you for those that were online for joining us. There's some materials there. If you want that book signed, I'm happy to do that. It's not going to be auctioned off anytime soon for $100,000. It costs $10. It's probably depreciated to about $1 right now, kind of thing. And there's a brochure there, a flyer. I'm starting a new service offering. Be happy to talk with anybody about that. Thanks, everybody.